Good afternoon. This is the May Beyond Black History program, and we're honored to have Walter Gilbert with us today. I'm going to spotlight him so you can get to see his great face instead of everybody else's. And he is going to talk to us today about the murals of Overtown. But I'd like to start with an introduction about Walter. First, I'm going to say something personal. I got to meet him just recently, and right away, I could say, this is a fun person to be around because he's such a great storyteller. So I think you're all in for a great treat today. He is a fourth generation Sarasotan or Florida. You tell me, Walter.
Both.
Okay, both. And he was the president of the Sarasota NAACP. Sarasota High School football coach even at one time. And you did some semi-pro football, and you're in the Hall of Fame on that too. You were a former city commissioner and candidate, okay. And you also have served on the African American Cultural Coalition, and you're the vice president right now of diversity and inclusion at Selby Botanical Gardens. But I think his pride and joy, if you follow him on Facebook, is that not only is he a proud dad, he's a proud grandfather and a proud great-grandfather. So I'd like you to welcome Walter, and we're going to be talking about those murals. Walter, thank you so much for this.
And I'd like to give me this opportunity.
Oh, it's a wonderful opportunity for us. I'd like to put in a little kudo to Paul Tolliver, who couldn't be here because he had to travel for some family concerns, but he did put together a really great program. So you're going to hear Paul Tolliver through Linda Crump, and I hope I do him justice. So to start this conversation, Walter, tell us a little bit about what actually is the Overtown Mural Project. What is it about?
Well, it was something that came about quite by accident. As you said, I'm a fourth generation person here, and I remember what Overtown was before they changed it to the Rosemary District. And being over in that area and looking around, I just didn't see anything that represented what that was and what it was to this community. And I just had to figure out a way to make sure that those pioneers that started the community that was there would not be forgotten, and knowing that a lot of people come here from elsewhere would not have a clue that that Black community was there at all.
I'm going to throw in a different question that Paul didn't bring up. You mentioned it just now. We're talking about someplace called Overtown, but it's now called Rosemary. What's the difference between the two?
Well, once the Overtown community got completely moved away, gentrified, if you want to use that term, and it was being redeveloped, the people that was in charge of that redevelopment had to, or feel they had to, come up with a different name for that community that they were developing, because they didn't want it associated with what was there. So the name Overtown had to go. And the closest thing they could use to sort of be historic and give it a nice sounding name was the cemetery that was in that community called Rosemary. Now, that cemetery was the original cemetery plotted by the city of Sarasota when it was becoming a city, because that part of the community was as far north as Sarasota went at that time. Another reason the Black community sprung up there. So in order to give it a nice sounding, welcoming tone, they chose the name Rosemary.
Thank you. So in your opinion, why is this such an important project to the people of Sarasota?
Well, Sarasota has a sad history of doing away with this history. It doesn't mean anything to these people to tear down historic buildings, change street names, change whole community names, in order for what they consider progress. So, as I said, I know what was there. There's few of us left that know what was there because the change was so complete, and I just couldn't stand it. So I just made it a mission for me and my family and other families, and for the entire city of Sarasota, to have that history recognized, because I think it's important.
So, Paul wanted me to ask you, who started it? Are you telling us that it's your family
That started the community.
started this project?
Yeah, I started the project. Yeah, I started the project by going around to buildings that were left and found the ownerships and started telling them I wanted to put some Black people on their walls. So it worked. Once those people that own those properties now heard the story and understood why it was important, it was a pretty easy sell.
Were there other groups involved beyond the people that you just talked about?
Once I got involved in doing it and I knocked on a few doors, I found some people that owned some of the properties that were happy to come in and help build this project up. One of them was Adam Pellinger. He is the owner or director of Dream Large, which he owns several properties down in that area, and he was very, very cooperative and willing to help and pitched in, and he's been my partner in this situation ever since. Yes.
Now, you can't do this for free. So how did you get some funding and how did you make that happen?
That was the hard part. Once again, just going to people that I felt would understand what this means, not only to the Black community, but to the city of Sarasota on a whole. So, Community Foundation, Sarasota County Community Foundation has been most helpful. So has Gulf Coast Community Foundation, independent people that gave monies because they understood the importance. And, that's on and on and on. Of course, I stick my hand in my pocket a little bit too. You can't do something and believe in something and not contribute to it yourself. So we did it just like that, and we're continuing to do it. We have other murals that we want to get done also.
Okay, so some of these I think are more like a photograph from the past, but some are actually artist renditions of things. How did you select artists and how did you end up picking different photographs?
Well, we didn't want all the murals to look the same. So that was a effort that we took upon ourselves to make sure we found different artists and different methods of putting these murals up. As you said, some of them are from actual photos. There's a process where they can take a photo and blow it up as big as you want and stick it on the wall pretty much so. But we were determined for it not to look so one size fits all, one artist does all the work. So that's an effort that's ongoing as far as the work that we're doing.
So is there a panel that reviews artists? I mean, do you have an idea and then you look for an artist, or do you find an artist and an artist says, what about this idea? I know some of them are about the people, but not every one is about
Yeah.
the people.
Yeah, we had a few pioneers that we definitely wanted on some of the murals, and then the other murals we wanted just to be art. And as we go through this, you'll see what we're talking about. As far as the people that review it, there's 3 of us at this point that actually work hand in hand with what we want on the wall, and we choose the artists ourselves. And whenever we get something that we want done, we make sure that the building owner is involved in saying that's what they want on their building.
Are any of the artists local artists?
Yes, some of them are local.
Okay, so if I was an artist and I said, hey, this sounds like a great project, is there a place or something I contact, or how do you let people know that as an artist, this is something you might want to be involved in?
Well, once you get involved in this, the word of mouth is crazy. You get people calling you from all over, that's one way. The other way, we get recommendations from like Ringling Art School on some of their artists that are good muralists. And so one of the people that work with me, Susan McLeod, she's a local artist. She knows people. She plugs us in. So that's basically how we've been doing it so far.
And how were those locations selected?
Well, as we go through, some of the locations were selected because of the people that was in the community at that time. In fact, some of them are on where these people actually lived. There's different buildings on these people that used to be these people's home sites.
Okay.
So yeah.
So my husband and I actually attempted, without your expertise and help, try to see all these murals. And I have to be honest and tell you that there were some of them or one of them that we kept seeing. And we knew others existed, but we weren't sure. So we're going to turn in the program right now to ask Jean to pull up the slideshow that we put together so that you can go through the different pieces of the different murals that are out there. And we hope that you'll talk about the location, the people, why it was chosen, that if there's something special about an individual and the artist that painted it, whatever inspiration it is. So Jean, if you'll put up the first slide, Walter, this is your turn to just talk about these particular murals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This mural here is representative of, I call them the Big Four. There you have Mr. Leonard Reed, the guy in the top hat. The lady in the white dress is Miss Emma E. Booker. And the two people at the top is Mr. and Mrs. Colson. Mr. Reed, we'll talk about each one of those more in depth. But these people were people that I knew we had to do individual murals of these people because these are the true pioneers of Overtown.
So, Walter, is this an actual mural on one of the buildings?
Yes, this mural is on what used to be Payne Chapel AME Church. It's right on the corner of Central Avenue and 5th Street.
And for those of you that worry about taking notes about these locations, when we get to the end of the slideshow, we've put together a page that has the names and the locations of all of them. So you will have a chance to see where those are. Who painted this one?
A guy named George Gunderson. He was from Michigan. I actually saw him do some chalk work. You've seen the chalk work on the sidewalks? And asked him to do these, and he did that one, and we've got some more work for him.
Does it take a long time to finish one of these?
Well, that one is really small.
Okay.
Compared to some of the other stuff you're going to see. I think he did that one in maybe 2 days.
Did you have a chance to meet any of these individuals?
No.
You're too young.
As I said, those people are pioneers.
Okay, all right. Let's go to the next slide.
This was the first mural we put up, and this was more of a test mural. This was done by a group of kids, well, not kids, young adults from Ringling Art School. Ringling Art College is called nowadays. And it's a photo of a local man. And as you can see, he's leaning on looks like a 40s, 50s Buick. And that car is in front of, if you could see that sign in the back, it says Ace Theater. The Ace Theater was the Black movie theater in our community. We was living in Sarasota, Florida, segregated South. We couldn't go to Main Street to go to the two movie theaters that was located there. So we had to have our own. Our Overtown community was a self-contained community. Everything we needed or place things and businesses we had to go to was all right there in that part of that community. So that was the Ace Theater, and that guy was looking for a date.
So again, is this a large mural somewhere or is it one of the smaller ones?
It's one of the smaller ones. It's also on the corner of Central and what is now known as Boulevard of the Arts. It was 6th Street back in those days.
I noticed that you said it was a collaborative effort with more than one student from Ringling.
Mhm.
Did they submit different kinds of sketches and things so that you could pick and say, no, this is the one we want?
No, this mural was designed by a professor up there, Tim Yeager, who is a well-known artist in this area, live in fact on the west coast of Florida. And he came up with the design. This is taken from an actual photograph, by the way. And he started the work and had his students come in and finish it up. And in fact, if you look right there at that tail light, the red tail light,
Right here?
yeah, right down at the bottom, to red tail light, I painted that.
Oh, fun. So you got to put a little touch in some
There
of
you
the
go.
murals that are up
Yes.
there.
Yes.
So you mentioned that there was a theater and you had a lot of other things in the community. What's another one that comes to mind that people might be surprised that at that time, Black people could not just go into Sarasota and do this. They had to stay in their community to do it.
Well, there was Horn's grocery store, there was Jim's shoe shop, there was, I mean, I can go down the list of Alice's restaurant, the funeral home was over there. So everything had to be within that community. And let me tell you the boundaries of that community while we're talking, because it was a nice sized community. Orange Avenue to the east, Highway 41 to the west, 10th Street to the north, 3rd Street to the south, that's known as Fruitville Road. That was Overtown.
Wow. So I mean, we didn't ask you this before, and forgive me if I'm throwing you a curveball. When do you think Overtown was first incorporated or named to be Overtown? How long ago are we talking that happened?
Well, the first Black people started coming here in the late 1800s.
Okay.
And the reason they came here was pretty much, and then we're talking one generation out of slavery, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
in fact, Mr. Colson, who we'll talk about later, was a former slave. He came here with the surveying crew that plotted the city of Sarasota. And we know for a fact that was 1884.
Wow. Okay. Anything else
We
about
know the
this slide?
reasons they came here because most of them came from South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We know why they came here. Those places weren't exactly heaven.
No.
Plus, this area was a wilderness. It was just being developed, and they had the skill sets that they could come here, work, start a community, and not be in those places. So that's why those Black people, who I call pioneers, first came here.
And before we move to the next slide, I want to remind our viewers that if you have a question, you can put it in the chat. And at the end of the slideshow, we'll have a time for Q&A, and I will try to ask Walter your questions. Jean, would you put up the next slide, please? Now, before you start, Jean and I were able to find this mural at least 4 or 5 times.
Hard to miss that one. This mural is of Buck O'Neill. Some of you may know who that is. Buck O'Neill is from Sarasota. In fact, where this mural is about 600 feet from where his house was, and probably another 300 feet from where he went to school, which was the only Black school here in Sarasota. Buck had to leave Sarasota in 1927 because he was getting ready to go into high school. And at that time in the state of Florida, there was only 4 high schools in the entire state that Black kids could go to. In fact, it was a stated policy by the Sarasota County School Board that Black kids here in Sarasota needed not to go any further than 8th grade because all they was going to do is be going out to Palmer Farm and counting crates. So they should have enough education to do that. But Buck was an exceptional student. Miss Booker, who we'll talk about later, was his teacher, and she arranged for him to go to Jacksonville. Oh, by the way, those four high schools were in Jacksonville, Tampa, Dade County, and Fort Lauderdale. So if you wanted to go to high school and you lived in Sarasota, you had to go to one of those cities to go to high school. So Miss Booker arranged for him to go to Jacksonville to Edward Waters High School. Edward Waters is now a college also up in Jacksonville. And once he got there, he became Buck O'Neil. You know, he had that baseball talent, and he was a very smart young man. But when just at the time Buck was getting ready to go to high school, Sarasota High School, that red brick building that's now the Art Museum on South Trail 41, was just being built and was going to open at Sarasota High School. Buck came running home, told his grandmother, and said, "I don't have to go now because they're opening a new high school." His grandma said, "Sit down, Buck."
Oh, no.
That's for white people. So he ended up going to Jacksonville, as I said, and the rest is history. Buck became a great baseball player in the Negro Leagues. He played for the Monarchs, which this is taken from a picture of him making a play at first base. He went on to become the manager of the Monarchs, and everybody knows his most famous player was Jackie Robinson, who went on to integrate Major League Baseball. And Buck became the first Black coach in Major League Baseball with the Chicago Cubs. He also started the Black Negro League Hall of Fame in Kansas City, and he was inducted in Major League Baseball Hall of Fame 2 years ago.
So who is the artist, and is that the artist on the scaffolding?
Yes, that's McAllister is his last name. I forget his first name. I'm sorry.
But I think this slide is
Matt McAllister.
okay. It's important to see the scale. Jane, will you flip to the next slide?
As I said, that's what we're doing. That's the kind of murals we're trying to put up. We want them to be able to be seen, recognized, and questioned, and want to know why and what. And we're putting up plaques to indicate who that is and why they're there. We're also in the process now of raising funds to light all of these murals. That's a 40-foot mural on the side of that wall.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else about Buck before we move on?
Well, you know, Buck is probably the most famous person we're going to see in murals here. Buck went outside the community. He became a national person. He put Black Sarasota on the map.
Did you ever get to see him play?
Never got to see him play, but and if I got time, I'll tell this quick story. I came home from school one day, and sitting at the dining room table was this man, and him and my father was engaging each other. And I never seen my father that engaged with a man before. So I needed to know who this guy was and why he could sit to the table and daddy him go back and forth like that. So of course, during those days, when you come home and adults are talking, you got scared. So I would go down the hall and just try to listen. So finally, when he left, I approached Dad. I said, "Who was that?" He said, "Oh, that was Buck." I'm like, "Buck who?" He said, "Buck O'Neil, baseball player." I say, "You talking about like Willie Mays or somebody like that?" He said, no, he's better than Willie Mays, before Willie Mays. He said he used to live right down the street. So then I had to find out who this guy was for that reason. Plus, like I said, I'd never seen my daddy that engaged with a man before. So that's the first time I saw Buck O'Neil.
Is there any kind of plaque or anything on the location of where he lived? If people wanted to know where Buck O'Neil actually lived here in Sarasota?
No.
You know, I think
Where he actually lived is probably where the radio station is. What is the public station right down the street?
right.
Yeah. So
WSRL?
no. Yes.
Okay. All right. Jean, will you pull up the next slide, please?
That is Miss Emma Booker. That is Buck's teacher. That's the lady that got him into Edward Waters. If you look at a PBS special that Buck did, he credits Miss Booker to making him the man he turned out to be. Miss Booker came here from Clearwater. She started the first Black school over in Overtown. She was just out of high school when she started teaching these kids. She ended up getting her teaching certificate, her bachelor's degree in education, probably like 5, 6 years after she had been actually teaching. She would teach these kids, go to school in the summer until she ended up actually being a certified teacher, if you want to say. All the Booker schools in Sarasota is named for Miss Booker.
Hmm. How long do you think she actually taught? Do you have any idea?
I'll have to look. I don't want to throw out some numbers and not be precise.
And who painted this mural?
McAllister painted that one too.
Okay. And I think if I recall, this one's pretty large also. We're
Yes.
not going to show a perspective on this one, but again, it's one of the larger murals that's downtown. And the approximate location?
That's located on the school building called SSCS, I think is the name of the school, Sarasota School of Arts and Science.
I think that's another joy that I had in helping put this together, is to find out the kinds of buildings that these are on. And I think you and your team have done a wonderful job in that aspect of it. Anything else you want to talk about Miss Booker at all?
Well,
Sure.
she was an extraordinary lady, number one, you know, for somebody to be that dedicated to education, you know, to keep going back summer after summer after summer, just so she could come back and teach kids that were being denied education during that. One of the ways she got her first school built, I don't know how many people people have heard of the Rosenwall school project. It was this guy, he was a founder or a partner with Sears and Roebuck, his last name was Rosenwall. And him and Booker T. Washington came up with a project where any community, Black community that wanted to start a school that didn't have one, that he would, any funds they came up, he would provide matching funds in order to open the school. That's how Miss Booker first started her first school.
I know we're going to have some questions and some additional things on these wonderful people, but let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Tell us a little bit about the Colsons.
That's Reverend Colson and his wife, Irene. Mr. Colson is the guy, if you ever go down to 5 Points right now, there's a bronze marker right on the corner where that park area is. And you'll see Mr. Colson on there as the guy that drove the stake in the ground there at 5 Points to plot the city of Sarasota.
Walter, not all of us know what 5 Points is. Will you tell us what that is?
I'm sorry. 5 Points is the center of downtown Sarasota. It's at the end of Main Street, the end of Palm Avenue, and I don't know the other two streets, but it's right there, and it's a roundabout there, and it's not far down from where the Opera House is.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the Colsons.
The Colsons, like I said, Mr. Colson came here in 1884. He was working for First Mortgage of Florida. First Mortgage of Florida was a realty company / land stealing company who got some type of way to grant to sell off this property that they had stolen from the natives. As you could see from the way they addressed, this was pretty early in Florida's development. Like I say, he came here in 1884. And Reverend Colson built Bethlehem Baptist Church, which is the first Black church here in Sarasota. And it was right there on Central Avenue in Overtown. And that community pretty much growed around Mr. Colson and others like him that was here at that time in that area. And that's his wife, Irene. Irene is a few years younger than Mr. Colson. But Mr. Colson couldn't read, by the way. He was illiterate. But we all know about those plantation type preachers. You know, they knew enough to quote or call themselves quoting to give a sermon. He was one of those kind of ministers. But his wife, Irene, was literate. She was younger than him. She was a good 10 years younger than him. And she pretty much ran the business ends of what Mr. Colson accomplished. And, well, I should say they accomplished as a family, being one of the first pioneer families here in the pioneer family in Overtown.
Now, this is one of the ones that's a photograph instead of a mural. Is that a tedious process to get them blown up big enough to put on a building?
Yes, it was. You know, some of them you distort them if you get them too big. If they're too small, you can't see them. This mural, by the way, is on the Planned Parenthood building right on Central Avenue.
Oh, I know where that is.
Yeah, and there's a reason. That is where the first church was that he built, and also where the parsonage, where they lived at this. And the other kicker is Irene was a midwife.
Oh.
So there you go, on the Planned Parenthood building.
Makes a lot of sense.
One more thing. Rosemary Cemetery is right across the street from this mural. Mr. Colson and his wife are the only two Black people buried in that cemetery.
Now, I've heard some rumors and stories about that. Did I hear something about it happening kind of when it was very dark and nobody knew what was going on?
Very dark and nobody knew. The people at First Mortgage, they loved Mr. Colson. He had worked for him all those years. He was, I'll say, like family to him as much as he could have been. So he wasn't one of the regulars, if you know what I mean. So when he passed, they didn't want him buried in what the Black cemetery was. And by the way, for a long time, if a Black person died here in Sarasota, they could only be buried in Fort Myers or Bradenton or St. Pete. There was no cemetery in Sarasota for them. But when the cemetery did open, it was what I call a Boot Hill type cemetery, you know, a couple of shovels in the ground, put you in there, nice knowing you, see you later. Hopefully in heaven. So they didn't want him buried in that type of cemetery. So under the cover of darkness, they snuck Mr. Colson's body in the back gate and buried him in the very back of the cemetery. I mean, if you ever get a chance to go there, his grave today is the closest grave to the street.
Wow.
Once some people found, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Once somebody figured out and say, wait, what's going on in the back of the cemetery? Because the back of the cemetery at those times, there was nothing else back there. And they saw this grave, who's that back there? And they found out it was Mr. Colson. So a bunch of them got together and said, well, you know what? You got to dig him up and get him out of there. We don't want him buried in the same cemetery with our loved ones. Then of course, First Mortgage said, well, he's staying. You know, we're not digging him up. And they said, okay, well, nobody else, don't bury any other Black people back there. They say, well, yeah, there's going to be another one. When his wife dies, we're going to bury her right next to him. And they say, no, we can't have that. They say, well, it's either that, if we have to dig him up, there's some more crooks out here we'll dig up also. So they said, well, okay, just them two. And that's why they're the only two Black people buried in Rosemary Cemetery.
And are there any descendants of the Colsons still around?
Not here in Sarasota. There's a couple over in Tampa.
Okay.
And everybody, whenever we get in a presence, I got a hell of a story about that.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Again, another photograph, and I thought it was interesting that you wanted the title ambassador. Tell us a little bit about why you would say ambassador for Leonard Read.
Leonard Read was a very, very important Black man in Sarasota. He came later than Mr. Colson. The way Leonard Read ended up in Sarasota, Florida, he was on a fishing boat, an Italian fishing boat that was going to Cuba. it docked over at Inner 10th Street, where you know where the Van Wezel is. There was docks over there, and that's where they used to come and offload freights and all that. Just before the roads, as you could see what he's driving, there wasn't a whole lot of roads around. But so Mr. Reed could walk from where those docks was right up 6th Street, and he was in Overtown. So he got off the boat. He was in Overtown. He went to a party. Story is he fell asleep after too much party, and the boat had left. So here's Mr. Reed in Sarasota, Florida. He don't know nobody. Nobody knows him, and the boat has left him. But Mr. Reed was an educated man. He went to Savannah Normal College, which is now Savannah State. Graduated about the head of the class there. And as he was moving around the community, somebody went and told Mr. Gillespie, who was another crook, but he was the first mayor of Sarasota. His story is unbelievable. But we'll stay where we're at right now. But he got in touch and found Mr. Reed and made Mr. Reed his right-hand man. Mr. Gillespie is credited with building the first golf course in the United States. But Mr. Reed built that golf course. He laid it out. I mean, you know, he did the work. Mr. Reed, Mr. Gillespie made him his right-hand man. He took care of all his household. He was his guy. The people in Sarasota, including the white people, had to follow his instructions per Mr. Gillespie. So he became the ambassador between the Black community and the white community. That's why I call him that.
He came, excuse me,
I'm sorry?
sorry. He came as a bachelor, didn't he?
Yes, he came as a bachelor. Mr. Gillespie had a Black lady working in his household that he ended up marrying and starting a family with.
Are there any Reeds still around?
No, there aren't.
Again, thank you. Let's move to.
And I want to point something out. When you look at this mural, when you look at it, you can tell from the way he's dressed, what he's driving, the surrounding area, what Sarasota would have looked like then.
Right.
And it's very important where we put that mural. That mural is on the Modern Hotel on the corner of Coconut Avenue and Boulevard of the Arts. That is where Mr. Reed's home site was.
Nice. Anything else about Mr. Reed? Okay, we're up to the next one, the dancers. Tell us a little bit about this one.
As I said, I also wanted to put up some art other than just pioneers. I was talking to a friend of mine that is involved with West Coast, and he suggested some dancing, something theaters. And so we found a lady, and that's what she came up with. And it's a huge mural, and it represents dance.
And what's the artist's name? Do you recall?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I should have done it for you guys, but I don't have it.
And where is this location? Because it looks very.
Yeah, that's on Boulevard of the Arts. Just, in fact, it's right next door to that first mural where the guy with the Buick is.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't miss it. Boulevard of the Arts and Central Avenue.
I thought he said.
I love the colors in this. It's very vibrant. So.
When the sun's going down, because it's facing to the west, and then just as the sun's going down, it's like a light comes on that thing.
Beautiful. Okay, let's go to the next one.
My favorite.
Tell us about it.
As I said, we wanted to put some art up also besides just the pioneers, and the young lady that we got to do this, I think she was from Oklahoma somewhere. I had seen some of her work, and she did a whole lot of Black women. So I told her, I said, I want a Black woman on that wall. And she said, okay. Anybody in particular? I said, no, whoever you put up, whatever you put up. So she went to work and she would call me every day. You want to come see? No, I said, I want to see the finished product. I don't want to see it till you're done. And she said, okay. So she called me. She said, well, we're done. She said, but I want you to come over first thing in the morning because this one faces east. So it gets the morning sun.
Beautiful.
And when I saw it, I was in love. And if you look, you could see why. This Black woman represents every skin tone in our race. She represents every hair texture in our race. And she's looking up, forward, and out. And I interpret the shadow as the other women, the rest of them, the future women doing the same thing. And the hair clippings as freedom.
It is absolutely stunning.
Now this one is about 40 feet also. I don't know if anybody noticed, but when we showed the big far out shot of Buck, you could see her in the background. I don't know if we could jump back to that.
Jean, do you have the ability to jump back to that one? Go, yeah, look
There.
in the back,
And if
way
you
up
look
there.
right over the top, that's her.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Jean, can you go forward to where we were?
Thanks, Jean.
Anything else you want to say about her?
She is also on the building right next to the Ace Theater.
You know, Walter, I thought it was so interesting that when we were talking about putting some words on these slides, that we all had a hard time saying, what are we going to put?
Yes.
And somehow music came to Jean and I, and we were able, I think, to capture your love of this particular slide with that name. I hope we did a good job on that.
I know you did.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, what's next for these Overtown mural project? What's in the future?
We have several things in the future. I always try to stir the pot as much as possible. Unfortunately, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But we have a ambitious next one. Jean, if you got that photo, that's going to be where our next one goes, and we want that to have Overtown down that column. You can see that from all aspects of that community. It's on the Housing Authority high-rise building there. As you can see, it's about 12, 13 stories up. And down that column in big block letters, it's going to be Overtown.
Okay. Do you think you would add any other of the prominent people from Overtown, or are you going to look more towards artistic expression as you move forward in these murals?
Well, the next, after that one, and maybe in conjunction with it, you know, funding is always the thing. We're going to do a street scene of Overtown, and it's going to progressively go from the 1800s right up until, say, 1950s, 1960s, by the time they got us out of there. We haven't come up with an actual concept of that. That's what's in my brain. But it's going to be some type of street scene that represents Overtown. I got a building in mind. I got the owner lined up, and he don't even know what's coming.
So I noticed that Paul Tolliver did add some information into the chat about a film that was done from students at the New College, featuring you, probably doing kind of a little walking tour of this. It's about 10 minutes long. And Paul has promised to make sure that it gets onto the Minnesota Asala website for those who might like to see it at some point. It's a little hard for him to do at the moment because he is traveling, but we thank you for that, Paul. Let's skip to the very next slide, Jean, if you can. And I think this is where, if you have the ability to do a screenshot, you might want to. because it gives you locations. But as you're trying to do a screenshot, I'd like you, if you can for us, please, Walter, to talk about Dream Large. You mentioned it as someone who's really an organization and an individual who's really been involved in trying to make sure that this can happen. We're not going to have more murals if we don't have more funding to get these up. So tell us a little bit, if somebody's interested, what they might be able to do to help.
Yes, if you look down in that lower corner there where it says Dream Lodge, I'm looking at it as the right-hand corner, but it's at the right-hand corner, or is it the left-hand corner for people?
It's the right-hand corner when we're looking.
Okay, yes, Dream Lodge. Dream Lodge is the guy, Adam Pellinger, who owns what used to be the Payne Chapel AME Church. That's where you saw that first mural with the 4 pioneers on it. He owns that. He turned it into an office building, but he did something interesting, and this is what made me approach him. He kept the building walls, and he calls it the walls from the AME church that was in there. When Mr. Reed, by the way, Mr. Reed built that church. The original church burned down, and he replaced it with what is there now. And by him being Mr. Gillespie's right-hand guy, and this was during the boom, he built this church in 1926. And it was the boom here, so there was a lot of construction going on. So he had the privilege of going to these sites and getting the leftover building materials in order to build this church. And if you can go in there, he'll let you in, and you can see in the walls, you can see the different materials he had at that precise time to build this wall. And it was a different material to build the other wall, and so forth and so on. And I tell you what, if a hurricane ever comes, I'm going in that building. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. But back to Dream Lodge, Anand has a business and a charitable thing that he does, and it's called Dream Lodge. There's a website. You can see exactly all the things he's done. He's very pro that area. He's involved with the Bay Project. I know a lot of you may have heard of that, but he's been helping me 100% with this, and he allows us to use Dream Lodge as a mechanism to take donations. So if anybody's interested, there's the site. Just make sure you tell him it's for me. I don't want
the Overtown murals. I'm going to ask Jean to stop sharing for a minute so that in case there are some questions that people might have, or if giving you an opportunity to kind of say anything you want to about these projects, your passion for doing it, what's going on. And again, I want to say thank you for being such a great teller of stories.
You know, I just like to say thank you for this opportunity. And it's nice meeting all of you, and thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this. You know, I know most of you from other places, and I know you probably got some good stories about where you're from. All I can do is tell the story about here. I got this passion sitting on the front porch while my grandmother was shelling peas. And I would ask her all these little questions. And you know what? She used to just let this little boy ask her a question, and she would tell me anything and answer anything I asked. And I got a lot of this knowledge like that. You know, when you get older, you start researching and find out that a lot of things I got wasn't in a book anywhere. A lot of stuff ain't in those books that they or the stories they tell. I know a lot of stuff about Mr. Gillespie. I know a lot of stuff about the culture of my grandmother because she was their contemporaries. And I am so thankful to her. And the things I do with this is just as much, you know, she was just a little washer lady, but she was here. And she shared this information with me, and I would be doing a disservice to her and others like her if I didn't share it. So she put this baggage on me, and I'm going to keep unpacking it.
We are grateful for that. what we're going to do right now, because we have been 50 minutes into this wonderful presentation, and we like our participants to have a chance to ask some questions, or maybe they know something they'd like to add. So I'm going to remove your spotlight. And if anybody would like to add something, ask something, raise your hand, do whatever. And I see that Bob and Carol Cat now have raised their hand. So we'll start with them. We can't hear you, Bob. We see your lips moving. Do you want to put it in the chat? Anybody else? Anybody have any experiences or have seen any of these? Gene?
Walter, what buildings are you thinking about utilizing for murals for your mural project in Overton?
There was, well, the building I showed you, that's the Housing Authority Senior Citizens high-rise building. That's the one we're going to put the Overtown mural on. There's another wall right next to, excuse me, where you see those dancers that's just as long. I'm thinking about that one for the street scene wall. So I'm always looking. Sometimes I'm down there, people is like, why are you walking down the side of our property like that? I'm trying to figure out if that wall gonna fit a mural that I want to put on that wall, you know, but I'm always looking. The thing is, you know, that place is being built and built and built. We're fighting right now to save the Colson Hotel, which is we consider a very historic building that they want to tear down and put up a development there. That was the only and the first Black hotel here in Sarasota. So, you know, the battle goes on, and we're just trying to work this thing.
Okay, I see that Paul Tolliver has his hand up. Do you want to unmute and say something?
Thank you, Linda. Walter, thank you very much for the presentation. I've had a couple questions asked by people who do not live in Sarasota, wanting to know how they can get started. What would you recommend? Because they were really enamored by this effort in Sarasota.
You mean how to start a mural project themselves?
Right, in their community.
Yeah, well, first identify where you want to do it. You know, make sure it's feasible to even start approaching people about it. Make sure that it's an area that's historic enough where you got some leverage to get this done, and make sure it's quality work when people let you, because that first mural is always going to be the hardest, and it has to be tight. It's going to have to be right, because if you mess that one up, it's going to be a hell of a hard sell to get that second one and that third one. And pretty soon you got people calling you, asking you, what about my building? What was my building? Do you know any history about where I'm going to build something? And they'll want to incorporate that into what it is they're doing.
Did anyone say no to you, Walter?
Oh, yeah.
So do you have an image you wanted on that building that you put on small, wait, you can put on small placards, and we'll protest and walk up and down the street in front of that building until they put it up?
Well, it's interesting you said that, because when I first approached the Modern Hotel, of course, you know, they got gatekeepers there. You can't get to the GM, you can't get to the ownership. So after about 4 trips, I had to tell the GM, because she wasn't passing this on to the owner. I know it. You know, she was doing her job. So I told her, I said, well, I'll tell you what, you got about a week. She said, a week? I said, yeah, you got about a week. And if I don't hear from ownership in a week, it's going to be about 20 Black people walking around this building with signs and talking about how terrible this place is and what they would not allow us to do for the history's sake. And this is the height of season. I'm sure you don't want these people outside your hotel. About 2 days later, the owners called me. Now, this is to say that lady was doing her job. I had to do my job. once I got in touch with the owners, they were super enthusiastic about that because they knew the value of having Mr. Reed on their building in the bigger business part of this. They knew there was value to that. And once they heard the story and knew the importance and where they were located, because they had no idea Mr. Reed's home site was there. You know, they just bought some property and built a hotel.
So,
Yeah, I use that ploy already, so we keep that one in our pocket.
okay, but I was just saying you have another crew here in case you need people, you know their names and you can have all of them.
There you go.
Now, do you want to try to unmute one more time to see if that'll work? Because it looks like you're on mute again.
There he is.
No, we still can't hear you. I don't know what's going
His
on.
mic might not be on.
Okay, so Jean, go ahead.
Walter, when you're doing your murals, are you looking for well-known muralists? Are you looking for students at the Ringling to do the murals, or
Well,
a combination or of both?
The well-known murals, I had the well-known ones are pretty much out of our budget unless I could get that kind of budget. When we were first doing this, you know, we were scraping and scrimping. So, you know, the well-known ones, I had one well-known one that wanted to do Mrs. Booker, but she wanted $40,000.
So we've got to look at that Dream Large website to make our donations
There you go.
to get you either the students or a well-known artist.
Exactly.
About how long does it take from start to finish to get one of these done?
Well, the 40 footer of buck took 2.5 weeks. The ones with the photos, we got to find the right photos. He can do that type in a week, but I don't want to overload it with that. You know, I want a good mixture. The young lady that I love so much, she took 8 days.
Mhm.
You know, some of the biggest expense after the artist itself is the equipment, especially when you're doing these 40 footers. You know, you got to have that crane type basket thing, and those people charge by the hour for those things. So,
And do you have to get permission from the city to do certain things?
if it's going to be overlapping some city property, pretty much no. But I always run it by them because I don't want to have to start putting paint up on the wall and then white it out, you know.
Mm.
But private property is private property, and as long as you're within city code, you know, you can put in pretty much what you want on the wall.
And when you hire out for that kind of scaffolding and stuff, is that where the insurance coverage comes to make
All
sure
that,
everybody's safe?
Yes.
So what do you think it costs to do the woman?
She cost right at $20,000.
And you want to do at least 5 more? Is that what I heard?
At least I'm looking at buildings all every time I turn the corner. I was like, whoa, there's another corner I could put something on, you know. But I do have 2 other people, and that one with this. Well, I have 2 other people: the street scene idea and the Overtown one down that wall.
Right.
By the way, they're building a park in Overtown, right on the corner of 6th. Right on the corner of 5th, or it's Boulevard of the Arts now. I'm still in my Overtown brain. It's Boulevard of the Arts and Central. They're building a park there, and we're trying to hopefully have that named Overtown Park.
Now, I did talk to you, Walter, a little bit before this to say if we could figure out how to get something into a walking tour, it might be a nice addition to have somehow. So if some of you know people who have those skills and abilities, Walter is right in saying it can't be a printed pamphlet because it'll always be out of date if it's a printed pamphlet, because he's going to continue to be putting up more and more murals. So we need to tap into some talent here to figure out how to do this on your phone. I went to a memorial site at the Pentagon and I was surprised. They said, just tune this in on your phone. You have a computer you're walking around with. and it was the audio. It tell you everything. It was a great way to do it, and they could always update it. Let's hope some other stuff comes out of this. I think we're right at the end of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and stop that recording, but we're not going to stop the Zoom. So thank you again, everybody. Unmute and let's give Walter a round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Great job. Great job.
Okay, so the recording has been stopped.